When you're interviewing for those positions, interviewing others, how do you measure character? What strikes out to you? What type of questions would you ask about?
That's a great question. And I'm fortunate to, I think, is one of my good capabilities is to be able to recognize talent in people. I've made, I think, out of maybe 10 decisions, I made one that didn't work out as well as I had thought. The others were great. I think it's getting people to tell you what they're good at. What do they enjoy doing and what are they good at? And then ask them to say, well, where do you struggle? Where do you think you have a weakness? And you can tell pretty much if they're being honest by how they answer those questions.
Hello, and welcome to the Resilient Leader's Journey, a podcast where we talk about the challenging currents of growth and change. Today, my guest is Doug Frey. He's a board member of the United Spinal Association, the SCI Boston chapter. Hello, Doug. Welcome. I want to ask you a question. I know that you earned an economics degree from the University of Pennsylvania, so I'm sure you get this a lot. If you had $1 for every time somebody asks you, can you change the economy? How much would inflation eat into it?
If I could change the economy, well, right now, what's the inflation? 3% or so, it would eat into that. But, great question, Trent, and good to see you.
Nice to see you. So how did you use your economics degree from UPenn, Go Quakers, in your career?
Well, I started pre-med and I got a C in chemistry. So that was the end of that story. So then I switched over to economics and was fortunate enough to take some courses at the Wharton School, which was great. And then went into work. I got a job as a banker in Boston, was a management trainee, and then got into different positions. My accounting and finance background was very helpful as I get into the investment management side of the business, and ultimately worked for large companies like Fidelity and Vanguard in the corporate retirement space, helping them develop K plans and other retirement instruments for their employees.
Sure. I understand you rose to the rank of managing director at Fidelity before you retired from that field.
That's correct. Yeah, I had about a dozen large clients and just tried to keep them happy and cross-sell when the opportunities presented themselves. And it was a good book of business. I had a very, very rewarding career in that front.
Fidelity is all about economies of scope. How many bites of the apple can you get out of your investors, correct?
That's correct. They want to be all things to all people.
Absolutely.
Where Vanguard is kind of a dichotomy. They used to be the two big players in the retirement space, and Vanguard was all low cost. We kind of joked, yesterday's technology tomorrow. But on the other hand, they returned a lot of the more investments to the ultimate investors.
I was not expecting smack talk about Vanguard here today, but I certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, no, great company, but boy, completely different philosophies. I mean, our worst nightmare, we flew a lot. Our worst nightmare was being caught in first class if Jack Bogle got on the plane. That was grounds for termination.
That's hysterical. Jack Bogle is notable as the founder of ETF funds, or one of the leaders of that.
Yeah, the index funds. And I'm still a disciple of that. I live and die by the S&P 500. And I do think, though, if you've been following it, it's time to get out of that race and go more diversified. But,
yeah. So you would have been in the industry just as Ks were becoming vogue in the early 80s. And so how did that change the both corporate mindset and investors' mindset?
It was a very attractive tax option for both individuals and corporations. Historically, it was all defined benefit plans, a traditional pension business. And those were very expensive to maintain, and they had to maintain funding. Where the 401k let companies direct the investments to the employees, which made a lot of sense, and it was attractive. And pretty much there was a guy named Ted Johnson who was down in Pennsylvania. He's the father of the 401k. He found the chink in the IRS code to allow the creation of that account. But it became widespread, and mutual funds were typically the vehicle of choice for investments. Every corporation would offer a dozen or so different mutual funds. So it was very attractive from a business standpoint for large mutual fund companies to get into that business.
Sure. We got to know each other through SCI Boston, which has undergone a couple of different name changes. When I first got involved with that in 2012, it was going under the name of Rise Above Paralysis and the Greater Boston Chapter. Maybe you can talk about your involvement. You're on the board of directors now, and maybe you can describe to us what that organization is and what it means to you.
Sure. And Trent, you had a spinal cord injury
I do.
way back, and we as did I. I had a spinal cord injury in 2012, really due to a random infection that anybody could have got. So it paralyzed me for 9 months. I was, had no movement in my arms or legs for 6 months, and I slowly got better. And you were fortunate enough to get better from your injury. Most people that have spinal cord injuries aren't that lucky. They end up paraplegic or tetraplegia. So I got injured in 2012, 2014. A gentleman, while I was injured, I was at Spalding in Boston. Gentleman came in and, just told me it wasn't the end of the world. You're going to be okay. Just make the most of it. And that really helped me. And it helped my family too. This thing is very hard on your family as well. So a couple of years later, I decided to see if I could give back, and I joined SCI Boston as a peer mentor, where I would talk with individuals who had spinal cord injuries and see if I could help them and help their family just get up the learning curve, which is very long and very steep. Give them some tips that I've learned during my journey. So, and then a couple of years later, I was asked to join the board, and then I was elected president of the board in 2017, and I've been the president of the board since. And what we try to do is provide support groups or one-on-one peer mentoring for people. We offer grants Trent, that you funded for many years for durable medical equipment that insurance companies don't cover, that are really important for people's quality of life. Ramps, shower chairs, hand controls for people who want to drive, and today now assistive technology. So we've grown the organization over the years, and we've got a great team on board now. It's a small niche because not many people have spinal cord injuries, thankfully, and it's really hard to raise money. But we've done a pretty good job of finding different sources to do that.
That always is the hardest part, right? It's the money. It's going to find the money. So when you're in those 9 months that you were paralyzed and what it took for you to overcome that, and I'm speaking not physically, I'm talking mentally, the mental resiliency that you needed to show, how did you convince yourself that life was going to go on and that there are other components of life and value you can still add?
To be totally honest, it was very difficult. I mean, I had some dark months and where I thought, this is the end. I mean, I'm never going to move again, and it's the end of the world. And I knew that I wasn't as seriously injured as most. So I knew I had a chance that I'd be able to recover some function. So that gave me hope. And then just seeing individuals from SCI Boston who were leading a productive, high quality of life in a wheelchair just gave me hope that, because I didn't think I'd be able to walk without assistance. That was the prognosis I got. So, there was hope for me. But I tell you, it took me probably a full year to get my head around it. Even as I was getting better, it's like, wow, why me? And,
Are there parallels or lessons that you would say from being in that mindset to being a younger entrepreneur who is struggling in their business? Are there connections between those two, do you think?
I think there is. I mean, I think you need to be positive. You can't get too depressed and too down, and you need to have confidence in your ability to get the most out of the situation and appreciate the little things in life. Somebody brought a plant in and I'm sitting in the bed. I can't move anything, but I really enjoyed watching the plant get a little bigger every day. Little things like that, but you just pick on things. And if you're running a business, there are a bunch of hurdles and you just need to try to knock them down one at a time and, try to set your priorities straight.
Sure. Once your recovery started, how was the feeling about gaining confidence in your abilities again? Going from, I couldn't move my feet, I can't move my arms, to now I can move. There must be a walk to run mentality. How did that go for you?
It was not a straight line. So you had many days where it was, many weeks, it was 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, and you thought you were losing ground overall. But what would really help me is I kept a journal of what I could do every day. And it was very helpful to go back and look back a couple of weeks, even though I thought I was going backwards. No, I could do things. I could get better range of motion in my neck. I could move my leg. I could move both legs. I could move an arm. So I was fortunate to be able to track it to see the positive progress.
Arthur C. Brooks talks about keeping a failure journal. And we can remember the successes, but sometimes we forget exactly how we got into the failures and what we were feeling and think of that time. And he says the greatest successes he has is when he goes back to his failure journal. Does that help you as well with your journal? Do you use
Absolutely. And what exercises was I doing before I backtracked? And maybe that I wasn't doing them correctly, or I needed to revisit them. It's like the analogy in sports. You don't learn anything by winning. You learn things by losing. So it's the same kind of analogy that, you got to go back and see how you did things and maybe do them better, or look to do something else.
Sure. We're gonna date this podcast with this next sentence. Yesterday, Rory McIlroy won the Masters, and you and I discussed. We both watched it. So, do you think Rory takes more out of winning and making the final putt on the playoff hole, or from the 14 years of the journey to get to that?
I think he learned a lot more from the 14 years getting there, and the struggles he had, and it was all culminated. I mean, boy, the shot he hit in on 18 on that first playoff hole was one of the best shots he hit all day. On the other hand, he knows how hard it is to win the Grand Slam. So, I think the journey teaches you a lot more than the.
Sure. I was with an entrepreneur, young entrepreneur, something I do, and spent some time listening to how he's growing his business. He's got a couple $1 million business, just under 3, and he wants to take it to 5. And I said, when do you want the $5 million? He says, well, I want to be there next year. I said, okay. How long did it take you to get to 3, the steps you have? And he said, it took me 10. Okay. I said, I'm excited for your 67% growth plan in the next 12 months. My next question to him was, where's the capital coming from? And so what would you say to a young entrepreneur that has made a good deal of success, but has reached this plateau, this barrier, kind of the same way Rory did over the last 14 years? What would you say to that person to help them overcome?
I would say evaluate and know what you're good at, number one. And then number 2 is look outside the box. And let me give you a quick example. We were struggling with fundraising. We had revenues about 150 grand a year. And it came pretty much from, your swims, a grant from the state, and our annual gala. And we wanted to hire staff, and we applied to grants, 2 or 3 grants a year, and we didn't win many of them. So we decided to hire an outside grant writing firm, which, there was a cost of entry of significant amount of money to get into it, but it turned out to be a great decision. And we've got sustained revenues of probably 350 grand a year, primarily due to the grant writing partnership, which had a, return on investment of about 9 months. I mean, we had a significant outlay, but we won so many grants right off the bat that it was a success story. And that was a hard pill for our board to swallow. Do we want to spend this amount of capital with no guarantee of any future success? But we convinced them to do that, and it was a success story. So for an entrepreneur, that's hard, because you got to realize, what are you good at? What can you do better on the fringes? Don't try something you've never done before, because that could be disaster.
Sure. I mean, that's a great piece of advice. There is, and one of the differences is with the board, right? You're dealing with the foundation's money. With the entrepreneur, you're dealing with either your own cash, your own credit, or the like. It makes it a little bit different. Makes it a little dicier. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And entrepreneur, I mean, you can go out and try to take loans and everything else, but you don't want to be burdened by those, interest payments and those types of things. With the board and our foundation, we run out of money, we shut down, end of story. I mean, it's not a happy ending, but it's not, somebody going broke and not being able to support his family and things like that. So it's a little bit of a different story.
Sure. Now, one of the nuances I did hear in that is that your revenues are more than 100% of when I was involved as much, and that I don't need to do any more swims. Did I hear that correctly?
No, Trent. You're a young man. You still have plenty of swims left in you. So whenever you get the urge, please feel free to do that, because we have more people. We are getting more applications than ever for people that need equipment to improve their quality of life.
Well, I'll tell you, we have a plan on the table for 2027. We have a plan, we have a mission, and we're going to get back in the water. It's going to be a lot different than something we've done before.
Well, that's awesome. I will spread the word. So that sounds like a commitment to me, if I
Yes,
ever heard one.
we're recorded. It's not like I can lie about it now. But yes, we are committed. And the thought process, I'll give it to you. At least the thought process is we're going to swim 40 miles in 40 hours for 40,000. So that is our goal. I wanted to go for 50 hours, 50 miles, 50,000. But I appreciate you thinking I'm young. No,
Relatively speaking, you're definitely.
relatively speaking, talking with the doctors, 40 will be better on my health and my heart and the like. But I'll give you some details, and my viewers and listeners will get some as time comes around. We'll start planning that, putting that better. In about 9 months, we'll start laying that out.
Well, that is awesome. Is it going to be 40 consecutive hours, or are you going to do 5 a day for?
Oh, 40 consecutive hours. The plan is going to be at the top of each hour, we swim a mile. And then top of the next hour, another mile, and for 40 straight times.
So that is awesome. Well, stay in shape. Watch what you eat, and I've seen you swim, Trent. You motor right along, and I think it's awesome that due to spinal cord injury, you do the backstroke, which is awesome.
That is my signature as a sign of solidarity. I agree. I want to go back to some items that we normally talk about. So in this podcast, we speak predominantly about character. We speak about confidence. We speak about commitment. And I want to know, as you sit as a board member, and I know you have other assignments that are like that, when you're interviewing for those positions, interviewing others, how do you measure character? What strikes out to you? What type of questions would you ask about that?
I mean, that's a great question. And I'm fortunate I think is one of my good capabilities is to be able to recognize talent in people. I've made, I think, out of maybe 10 decisions, I made one that didn't work out as well as I had thought. The others were great. I think it's getting people to tell you what they're good at. What do they enjoy doing, and what are they good at? And then ask them to say, well, where do you struggle? Where do you think you have a weakness? And you can tell pretty much if they're being honest by how they answer those questions. And I get a pretty good read on somebody. And, my management style is to try to make sure I let them succeed, get everything else out of the way so they can do their main job and thrive in it. And to give them confidence, working for a charity, there's a lot of little details you never did before. So you give them some training, you let them have some success, and they're off and running.
Sure. When I had a lot more people working for me, people describe, so well, tell me what your job description is. And I put down, I move rocks. My job is to move the rocks out of my teammates' way so that they can be more successful. And it's easier for people in our position, so to speak, than it is for the people that are working with us. You feel the same?
Yeah, no question. And it's important that you give them attaboys, attagirls, and make sure you prop them up when they're having tough times and be there and be willing to help. That has made a big difference to our team. That, we get overwhelmed certain times of the year, and, all hands on deck means a lot, and we have regular communication. Everybody knows what's going on, what the key priorities are. And that makes it big. I mean, you need to build a good team that everyone feels they're appreciated and adding value.
Sure. As a leader, how do you hold yourself accountable to your team?
I mean, that's a good question. We have metrics that we follow, and we have goals, and that's all kind of, just basic management. But I hold my myself accountability is by being there and answering questions and solving problems, and getting to, if there there's conflicts occasionally between people, you got to get those resolved, get everything on the table, and make sure everybody's happy. And when I make presentations to the board about what the staff is doing, I'm very positive and appreciative of their efforts.
Sure. It's getting some level of unified buy-in. Do you, as a leader, do you find that team leaders should speak first or should speak last? How do you think about that?
Well, we usually do it. Let everyone talk about what's on their mind and what's working, what's not, what their suggested solutions are, and then we add value. So we let the team members get involved first, and then we try to backfill that to help support them during our
Sure.
staff meeting.
And how does that work for them? Do the team members feel more empowered because they're getting to speak first, more, better? All those.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that it's more, am I important to this organization? Yes, you are. You get to speak first. Tell us what's on your mind, and we'll see if we can fix it. But if there's any issue.
Sure. Just thinking, I was in a store the other day, and it made me think of an economic question. There was something on sale, Doug. So tell me, with your economic mind, do you start doing supply and demand curves in your mind?
I'm so far removed from supply and demand curves, but no question. I mean, I happen to have a wife who feels guilty buying things on sale. So I'm always encouraging her to, take advantage of that, because, there is fluff in the regular price. You can get a better deal.
I thought you were going to say, no, she would never buy it on sale. She only buys things at full price.
Well, that's been the trend, that's for sure.
Do you have a favorite fictional character?
That is a good one. I kind of laugh. Forrest Gump, I've always enjoyed him just for his approach to life and how he got himself into all those positions.
Well, those leaders, they're not fictional, but they will become immortal for their contributions. But Forrest Gump, so what about his personality that strikes you? What's unique about that you say, I resonate with him?
Yeah, just his tenaciousness and his, the whole ping pong thing and the running thing and the just stick-to-itiveness and being positive and just trying to be happy, and all of those attributes, I think, are something I strive for.
And like Forrest Gump, you are a very humble person as well, and humility is one of his great traits.
Thank you. I don't know about that, but thank you.
I do. Doug Frey, board member of SCI Boston, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate having you today.
Thank you, Trent. It's been a pleasure, and good luck, and can't wait to hear more about your swims.
Wonderful. Friends, thank you for joining. Leadership is challenging, and navigating those currents are difficult, but with one tack or another, we can get there together. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please go ahead, subscribe. Tell a friend about it. That way you can see new podcasts fresh as they come out of the oven. You can find us on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. I will see you again next time. Be well. Thanks.